My name is Judy Gannam, and I am from Murrells Inlet. Patients across the state and their loved ones have gathered here today to plead with the Senate to pass the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act before the crossover deadline. Failing to act this week will condemn thousands of South Carolinians to another year of needless suffering. S-150's groundwork for a tightly regulated seed-to-sale medical cannabis program will give patients with a doctor's recommendation and specifically documented debilitating conditions safe and legal access to medical cannabis. We urgently implore our representatives to vote with their minds and hearts and vote yes. Patients from all walks of life who desperately need an alternative to what is currently available to them are banding together. Patients like your grandmother, sister, neighbors, law-abiding citizens who want to live a better quality of life and positively contribute to their communities. Patients like my severely disabled autistic daughter, Kira. She cannot speak to tell us how much pain she is in from her medically complex conditions and reacts with aggressively violent behavior. Like other patients, she has tried other medications available currently that either did not work or the side effects were intolerable. These patients are here today to tell you their story. Naysayers will tell you that people will be blowing smoke in the streets and negatively impacting the youth. This idea is false. There is a ban on smoking on the bill and even accessing whole plant. There is a lengthy process to become a medical card holder, and these patients will be ingesting cannabis derivatives in the privacy of their own homes. A recent study showed states with medical cannabis programs are not associated with higher odds of adolescent marijuana or heavy marijuana use. It was actually lower than states with no program in place. There's absolutely no reason why South Carolina would have different results. The Epilepsy Foundation, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, the South Carolina Podiatric Medical Association all support the bill. More than 70% of South Carolina voters believe medical cannabis should be allowed. While states including Arkansas, Louisiana, and Utah have allowed this medical treatment option, South Carolina remains one of only 14 states that prohibits the use of medical cannabis. I would like to introduce to you first Jill Swing, who is a president and founder of South Carolina Compassionate Care Alliance and mother to Mary Louise.
Thanks, Judy. I've been coming to Columbia to advocate for legalization for medical cannabis for my daughter, Mary Louise, for 7 long years. This is actually my 8th session if you count the year that we passed the CBD law in 2014. But as a mom, I will never give up on my daughter, and I'll never, ever give up on fighting for access to medicine that I've seen firsthand greatly improves her quality of life. Thank you to the members of the press for being here, and thank you to our lawmakers and supporters, as well as our patients, for attending this press conference today. I'm very grateful for the many lawmakers who have stood up for patients in South Carolina in an effort to provide them with relief from their debilitating illnesses, many of whom are standing behind me today. But first, I'm honored to now introduce to you the sponsor of the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act from Beaufort, Senator Tom Davis.
Thank you, Jill. Let me start out with a couple of truths. First of all, there's no longer any debate about whether or not cannabis or marijuana can be of medicinal benefit. That's an argument that's been put to bed. The 2017 report by the National Academy of Sciences reviewed over 10,000 scientific abstracts and concluded that there was conclusive evidence that cannabis can be of medicinal benefit for many purposes: chronic pain, neurological disorders. I mean, that is not in dispute anymore. So let's go ahead and establish that one fact. The second fact is the federal government has green-lighted the states and told the states, go ahead with this medical cannabis. And now why do I say that? It's because every year Congress in its budget passes a proviso that says none of the money appropriated in this budget can be used to prevent states that have legalized cannabis for medical purposes. We know that because the executive branch has said the same thing to the U.S. attorneys and the Department of Justice. You are not to commence any action to challenge any states that have legalized cannabis for medical purposes. We also know that because the federal courts have consistently recognized that medical cannabis falls within the state's power. So if there is no dispute that cannabis has medicinal qualities to it that are beneficial to so many people, and there's no argument that the federal government's going to stand in the way. And look, how can there be an argument when you've got 36 states in the District of Columbia that have legalized it? Not one single law has been challenged in any event. It is our obligation under those circumstances to come up with a safe, legal way for individuals in South Carolina with their doctor's authorization and supervision to take cannabis to alleviate their suffering. It is absolutely absurd to force them, in some instances, to take opioids and other pharmaceuticals that are far more harmful to their body simply because back in 1972, John Mitchell, President Nixon's Attorney General, decided to put cannabis as a Schedule I drug to stick it to the left-wing anti-war people and to blacks. That's the reason. Listen to the Oval Office tapes. This is a Schedule I drug because President Nixon wanted to punish some political enemies. And here we are 50 years later fighting that legacy. It's ridiculous. 36 states have authorized this. Alabama, Arkansas, Utah, conservative states have authorized this because they recognize that what a patient takes for their condition ought to be something between the doctor and that patient. It harms nobody else and provides great relief to suffering. We need to get this bill passed. I understand what South Carolinians want. They want to empower doctors. They want to help patients. They do not want recreational use. I've been working on this bill 7 years, working with law enforcement, working with the South Carolina Medical Association, making sure this was a strict, regulated medical bill with severe penalties for violation. It is in no way a wink and a nod toward recreational use. It is in no way a slippery slope toward recreational use. It is what its title implies, a compassionate care act that provides medicine to people who desperately need it. We're going to get this bill passed. And if there are some up on the Senate floor that are still in this reefer madness, drug war mentality and block and stand in the way of this bill, I will exercise my rights as a senator to respond in kind to every single other bill on this calendar. Thank you.
For members of the press and for the sake of our lawmakers, who I know they have to get into session in a few minutes, we're going to deviate slightly from the plan. If it's okay and if y'all will stick around, I'm going to have Senator Stephen Goldfinch speak next and then allow y'all to ask questions of the lawmakers, and then we'll bring on our patient speakers. So right now I'd just like to introduce Senator Stephen Goldfinch from Georgetown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first begin by thanking everybody that's been involved in the advocacy of this. It's really been a tremendous effort, including Senator Davis, who's done fantastic yeoman's work on this. I want to say that I started out on the other side of the aisle. I saw this issue as something completely different than the way I see it today. But I was overwhelmed with the number of patients, the number of children that I saw come into my office with severe epilepsy, and in fact, I saw a mother administer the drug to her child and look at me and say, I could go to jail for helping my child. As a parent myself, it broke my heart, and it changed my perspective. And I began to realize what we are doing as a state is denying people that need it the most, denying people that have severe disabilities and pain, for the sake of trying to keep a drug out of the hands of a druggie. Ladies and gentlemen, I find that to be abhorrent. The same analogy can be said about masks or gloves. We should ban masks and gloves for doctors or nurses' use because guess what? A bank robber may use them to rob a bank. It is a ludicrous argument that we continue to make at the government level, and it needs to stop now. It needs to stop today. Anybody on the Senate floor that is continuing to challenge this mentality is pushing back against the forces of nature and the forces of society and the forces of history, because we are moving in the right direction. We are on the right side of history, And I would encourage each and every one of you that are listening to the sound of my voice to call your senator, call your representative, and tell them to get on the right side of history. Thank you.
And next we'll have from Charleston, Representative Lynn Bennett.
Thank you so much. This has been such a long, long fight that didn't need to be this long. And I encourage the Senate to get this bill out of their chamber and to our chamber, where we can continue the fight to bring relief to people who need this medication, because that's what we're talking about, my friends, a medicine, so that their lives can be better, improved, so that they can function like you and I do, so that they can relieve pain and suffering. I've supported this bill for 7 years, and I will continue to support it, but I hope this is the last year that we ever have to worry about it. So senators, get it passed. I'm here. Thank you all.
Okay, and now if I can have Senator Davis and I don't know, did we lose Senator Goldfinch? If you want to come and just answer a few questions, if you have a minute.
Sure, I'm happy to. Other questions?
Senator Davis, why is this the year to get this done? I mean, it's been a long, long time. Why is this the year you think it's going to happen?
Well, I think every time you see another state, a conservative state like Alabama last year, 72% on a referendum legalize it, people start to understand that this is not only the right thing to do from a public policy standpoint, it's the right thing to do from a political standpoint. I can't think of any other issue in South Carolina where 70% of South Carolinians agree. But guess what? 70% of South Carolinians, irrespective of their political party, agree that cannabis ought to be made available to patients with a doctor's authorization and supervision. So you can only have that separation between what the people want and what politicians deliver for so long. At some point in time, that gap breaches. This is going to be that year, because I think we've got arguments on our side, we have the people on our side, we have a good piece of legislation to rally around, and we have all these volunteers that have spent countless hours advocating. That's why I think it's going to pass this year.
Where's the push on the federal level?
I'm sorry, sir?
Where's the push on the federal level?
Well, at the federal level, first of all, I mean, the federal government has made it abundantly clear it wants the states to do what they think is in the their citizens' best interest. You have Congress every year in the budget says none of the money can be used to, set aside these medical marijuana laws in states. The executive branch says to the U.S. attorneys you can't bring any actions to challenge medical marijuana laws. The federal courts say this is well within a state's power. So the federal government has already made very clear it is comfortable letting the states decide on a state-by-state basis what's best for their citizens. Now, in regard to what might happen at the federal level, I think most likely you're going to see some sort of banking reform that allows federally chartered banks to accept proceeds from these establishments. And then eventually, at some point in time, even the federal government and even the DEA and even the Federal Drug Administration, they'll reschedule cannabis. But guess what? The federal government has already said over the last couple decades to the states, go ahead and do what you think is in your citizens' best interests.
What do you say to the people that are going to say, this is just the start of legalization?
Well, it is a start of legalization for medical purposes. I mean, it's going to, in regard to recreational use, every single time I have asked law enforcement, what can we put in this bill to make sure it's not a slippery slope? We put it in this bill. As was mentioned before, there's no smoking of cannabis because they say that's the way people recreationally consume it, and we want to draw a sharp distinction. They wanted to have seed-to-sale tracking systems to know where the cannabis is at all times. They wanted to have felony penalties in regard to violation. I mean, every time we've asked to say, we want this to be a medical bill, help us reinforce that, we've incorporated their changes. So I think that their concerns are misplaced in that regard.
Is there any good reason why this shouldn't pass?
I'm sorry?
Any good reason why this shouldn't pass?
Well, I mean, you still have some individuals who culturally grew up thinking that marijuana was something that was only smoked recreationally. I think the last couple of decades, science has shown that there are tremendous medical properties to this. It can help people who are suffering that traditional pharmaceuticals cannot address. There is absolutely no good reason in 2021 for this bill not to pass. What we're doing is empowering doctors. We're allowing doctors to do what they think is in their patient's best interest and what science has conclusively shown can be in their best interest. Jill Swing's child, suffering 100 seizures, 200 seizures an hour. I mean, that is no quality of life. Taking cannabis oil alleviates those seizures and allows that child to have a life. That's just one of thousands of examples. I have a constituent, Margaret Richardson, who's got a neurological problem in her face, where sometimes she wakes up screaming. She says, howling like an animal in pain, doubled over. No pharmaceutical drugs that have been given to her helps her, but one puff of a marijuana cigarette, the pain goes away like that. Ask yourself this: if that were your child, if that were your wife, if that were your brother or sister, and they had something sitting on the bedside table that could take away that pain, would you deny that to them? Would you tell them, I'm sorry, you have to sit back and howl in pain until somebody up in Washington, D.C. and the FDA decides to reschedule this? No, you wouldn't do that. No rational, sane person would do that. And so what does she have to do now? What do thousands like her have to do now? They have to go out and buy it illegally. And they don't know what's in it. It's not tested. This bill calls for it to be a pure product, labeled, no adulterants, safe for consumption. That's the humane thing to do. That's the compassionate thing to do. There is absolutely no rational reason to deny passing this bill. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, senators and representatives who are here. I know you guys have to go. So now I would like to switch gears just a little bit. The word compassion was inserted into the title of this bill for a very specific reason. The bill is about much needed compassionate use of medication that is still federally illegal, which forces states to take it upon themselves to provide their citizens with that medication. And thankfully, it is through their caring and compassionate leadership that laws have been changed in 36 states to provide access for patients. Now is the time that South Carolina lawmakers to demonstrate that same compassion for its citizens. The heart of this movement has always been in the patients, and so now I would like to introduce several patients who have come here today to make a few very brief statements on what legalization of medicinal cannabis in South Carolina would mean to them and the impact that it would have on their lives. So first, is Jenna here? Jenna is right here. Jenna? So,
would you be able to hear her with these microphones?
She goes up on the side now,
right here?
Let's move it. Let's move this today.
Sorry, Jenna.
So maybe I'll have you go after Jenna, just since y'all are on the same level.
Also, Mac has a few inches on him.
Right, yeah.
I can hold my
That'll be good. I think we have to do that while you're speaking. That's kind of awkward, right? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Want to just lay it in between?
I can lock it in place here. I think it'll be all right.
No, I asked for one.
I know, right? It's all good, though. It works. Okay. Just come a little closer and just speak louder, and that's fine. You'll be fine, man.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming and listening. Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming and listening to us. I was born and raised here in Columbia, South Carolina. I moved to Tucson, Arizona for college and stayed there for 15 years. But about 12 years ago, I was in a terrible car accident with my husband, and I endured a spinal cord injury, which caused me to be paraplegic. I can no longer walk, and and that wasn't the hardest thing that I had to go through on this journey, which was actually gastroparesis that was caused by the spinal cord injury. This disorder basically stops your stomach from digesting and puts it in reverse, and I'm unable to stop vomiting. without going to the hospital and receiving IV meds and fluids. And even with the IV meds, sometimes it can take several days for the vomiting to stop. So medical marijuana legislation was passed in Arizona, and I became a card-holding patient. The first time that I tried it, I was in my worst-case scenario. I was vomiting for hours, about to go to the hospital. I tried it. 2 hours later, I came out of the room and was ready to get something to eat, which had never happened before. I had tried every medication that the doctors gave me, and none of them helped at all. So I was in a desperate situation, and I needed help. I was consistently spending 15 or more days in the month of the month in the hospital, and after I tried it, I stopped having to go to the hospital. I had less and less bad days. And I was finally able to eat a healthy diet and become a healthy person again. I was also able to meet many other medical marijuana patients, and I was also inspired by their unique stories on how it helped them. I met vets who fought for this country with PTSD. I met chronic pain patients that were able to reduce or stop using opioids as painkillers. I met people with cancer that were able to reduce their suffering, and I met people with seizure disorders that can now live normal lives, and countless others. There are so many sick people just like me who need this chance. They have so much value to offer the community, but they are sick and they have tried everything else. Medical marijuana was a large part of the reason that I stayed in Arizona so long, but I needed the support of my family. But choosing between your health and well-being and having the support of your family was a very tough decision for me. Medical marijuana was a miracle for me, and it was a cure that didn't exist before. I no longer had to spend all of my time being in the hospital and recovering from being in the hospital. I could enjoy my life, take back my life, and most of all, become a contributing member of society again and be with the people that I love. I could work again because it wasn't the disability that you see that was ruining my life. It was the one that you couldn't see. Since moving back here, I am unable to work like I used to because I spend a lot of my time being sick. So I am pleading with you, help me become a contributing member of society again and help me get my life back again. Thank you all. Yeah, my first name is Jenna, G as in George, E-N-N-A, and my last name is Vandestouwe, V-A-N-D-E-S-T-O-U-W-E.
You can get over there.
My name is Mac Hudson, and I'm here today for the cause of legalizing cannabis for medicinal purposes. I'm 29 years old, and I got in a car accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down when I was 16. I shattered my L1 vertebrae, fractured my skull, and my C1 vertebrae in my neck. I have been to multiple doctors and surgeons and tried many different procedures over the past 13 years trying to figure out the cause and solution for my unbearable daily chronic pain I live with. Through all of that, I still managed to graduate high school in time, continue to college to get an associate's degree, and have been working as an AutoCAD technician for a civil engineer for the past 6 years. And I also play wheelchair basketball and just started wheelchair rugby league, which we are working towards the World Cup at the end of this year. And this is my fellow player, Ben Lavender. In order to avoid breaking the law, I either have to travel out of state to medicate with cannabis, which I've done, been to California and seen a doctor and been prescribed, and I've been to Denver almost 10 times to see doctors and medicate out there. I either have to travel out of state or sacrifice my long-term health and take opioids every day, which you hear about people overdosing from on a daily basis, or I just have to live with the ridiculous pain and not enjoy life, and that's no exaggeration. I'm very thankful for law enforcement, and I even have 2 K-9 officer buddies that support my effort to better my life. But from what I've seen on the news, the chief of SLED, Mark Kills, would rather me have to live in pain or take these pills, which there's 90 Percocets in this bottle right here, and I've worked down from taking 240 pills per month to these in order just to live a daily life. So if we can legalize cannabis this year, that would be one less year that people have to depend on opioids or sacrifice and live with chronic pain all day, every day. So if y'all could just take into compassion and think about your own self and your own family members that may or may not be in this situation, but to live with pain all day, every day is the hardest thing that I struggle with. Thank you.
Can we get the mics back?
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, next we have Tam Hicks. She's from.
Hold on a second.
Oh, sorry.
Let them get set up. Test 1, 2.
Are we good? Can you hear me? Okay, now Tam Hicks is from Columbia. She's a retired educator who suffers from MS, and she's going to just say a few words about how important medical cannabis is to her.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. MS is a virus, and it affects the central nervous system, or the CNS, which includes your brain and every nerve fiber in your body, which connects to all your organs, your heart, your toes, everything, and it tells them what to do and when to move. I'm very blessed and thankful not to be in a wheelchair, but I very easily could be. When I first was diagnosed at MUSC in Charleston, I could barely get out of bed. And they gave me pharmaceutical drugs, first in shots and then in pills, and I became addicted to opioids. And you add that plus alcohol, and I completely totaled a car. So I have been sober now for 11.5 years. So I no longer take opioids, and opioid addiction is one of the reasons that we need medical cannabis. The pharmaceutical companies want to keep pain relief on their side. They want to corner the market on that. But medical cannabis can relieve pain without being addicted. I woke up in pain this morning. Unfortunately, I had to take some pharmaceutical drugs and have a couple cups of coffee to get moving again. MS keeps you from moving. It wants to put you in a wheelchair. But with physical therapy and daily walks with my dog, I'm able to move. Medical cannabis will help relax your muscles, which is mostly what I have. Nerve pain and muscle pain is just the worst. It burns, it tingles, it numbs your feet. My left foot's a little bit numb right now. So, but the cannabis, the THC in the cannabis will help relieve your pain. Now the CBD, which is legal, it's not too bad, but that's, I guess, better than nothing. But please help my psychologist, my psychiatrist, my internist, and my neurologist are all in favor of this bill and all in favor of medical cannabis, and they would prescribe it for me if they were able. So please, all the senators, please vote for S-150 and pass this bill. It will help me, and it will help hundreds of thousands of more patients just like me. And if not, they're selling an acre of land is about $1,500 in Colorado.
Thank you, Tam. Okay, next we have Cody Calliman, and he's from Edisto. He's a Marine Corps veteran and a South Carolina hemp farmer who has previously used medicinal cannabis when he lived in California. So he's going to share a few thoughts about that.
Thank you. I never tried cannabis until about 3 years ago when I was living in California. Around that same time, a very close family member of mine was in excruciating pain after a surgical accident, no fault of her own. She was taking about 130 milligrams of opioids a day and was barely human anymore. I remember being able to call her and she couldn't even speak. She was unable to eat or even drink water, and I knew my mother would have passed away if it wasn't for her trying cannabis. And thanks to cannabis, she was completely off the opioids within 2 weeks and is now a contributing member of society once again. Seeing how it gave my mother her life back, I finally decided to try cannabis for myself for my service-related injuries and PTSD. To my surprise, after trying cannabis a couple times, I was shocked that it isn't as evil as we're all taught it is. I was finally able to sleep for more than 5 hours a night. I don't have nightmares anymore, and nearly made all the pain from my nerve damage go away. I've watched plenty of veterans I know on a VA pill diet just not human anymore. I just want to see them normal again. Normal as in the men I met and I served with, not the pill zombies they became. This is why I dropped and sold everything 2 years ago, left a very stable government job in the middle of COVID to come to my beautiful home state and help build this hemp industry and hopefully the future cannabis industry. It's an amazing plant that is capable of so much. Everyone I've met in this industry all have one thing in common. This plant has either affected their lives or one of their loved one's lives for the better. Now is the time to help change lives of so many people in pain. Let us have the choice. We've always been told our country is land of the free and the home of the brave, and I valiantly stand by that. But now is the time where we were the brave ones, and now is the time for us to have the freedom of choice of treatment. Thank you.
Okay, next is Michael Harvey from Lexington. He is a 39-year veteran, a registered nurse who serves on the board of the American Cannabis Nurses Association, as well as the South Carolina Compassionate Care Alliance. Mike?
Good afternoon. I would like to thank Senator Tom Davis, Jill Swing, and those South Carolinians who support cannabis as medicine. As a registered nurse and a veteran over 39 years in the Army, actually, I plead with our legislators to approve the medical cannabis bill, Senate Bill 150. This would benefit many patients with specific medical conditions whose current medications are not managing the signs and symptoms of their diseases. This bill would also allow for safe access for this medication. Statistics show that approximately 18 veterans take their lives each day. Many of our veterans have tried and failed their current FDA-approved medication options. Medications such as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the SSRIs, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, SNRIs, along with benzodiazepines have been in use for years, yet are nowhere near 100% effective. Many veterans make their final decision to end their lives following failed treatment options. No American should have to resort to taking their life to stop their pain and suffering. As a registered nurse who has taken the time to evaluate the mountains of peer-reviewed, evidence-based research, I fully support this bill. Research is being conducted both here in the United States Israel, Canada, United Kingdom, and other developed countries. Cannabis education needs to be more accessible to our healthcare providers, our nurses, our pharmacists, and the general public to stop the stigma against medical cannabis. It is time that we stop living in the cannabis prohibition era based on reefer madness and fully utilize medical cannabis based in science and not fear. Thank you for your time for me to speak, and please support the medical cannabis bill, Senate Bill 150. Thank you.
So thank you to the members of the press for being here. All the individuals will be available for questions individually or if you have questions after, but I would like to close with this one statement. As you know, most of you know, the motto of our state is Dum Spiro, Spero, while I breathe, I hope. And the hope of these patients here today and thousands across the state who could also benefit from the legalization of medicinal cannabis lies in the hands and in the hearts of 170 lawmakers who are in these two chambers above us. We are here today to plead with all of them. Don't put that hope on hold any longer. Do y'all have any questions? Or if you want to speak with individuals, that's fine too.